Adults pay rent, Mom. You're just a burden now. The words shot through the living room like a bullet. I stood frozen in the doorway, my phone slipping in my hand, heavy as a stone I couldn't drop. My daughter, Emily, 32, with her polished nails and steady glare, looked at me as if I were not her mother but a stranger overstaying her welcome. My heart thudded so loud, I could hear it over the clock ticking on the wall. Tick. Tock. Each second weighed heavier, pressing into my chest. My throat burned, yet no sound came out except a hoarse whisper that surprised even me. I can't do this anymore. The room shrank. The wooden chair creaked as I leaned on it, my knees trembling. The lamp above cast a cruel white light, cold and sharp, making every wrinkle on my face a reminder that time had passed me by. Emily crossed her arms, lips curling as if I were a tenant late on rent, not the woman who had carried her through nights of fever and hunger. I could still smell the faint detergent from the laundry I had folded earlier that day. The basket sat by the couch, socks and shirts stacked neatly. My silent offering, the last one she never even noticed. For a moment, I thought I might collapse. My chest tightened, palms damp, the phone slick in my hand. I wanted to shout, to demand, "How dare you?" But my voice betrayed me. All I managed was a shallow breath, a stumble toward the door. Emily's eyes didn't soften. They stayed hard, calculating, almost bored. And in that instant, I understood something brutal. I was no longer a mother in her eyes. I was a ledger entry, a wallet with thinning pages. The hallway clock ticked again, slicing through the silence. My whole body shook. I whispered to myself, half prayer, half confession, "Tonight, I walk away." And I did. When I pulled the door open, the cold night air rushed in, biting my skin, but it felt cleaner than the suffocating heat of that living room. I stepped out, clutching my small bag, the sound of the latch clicking behind me louder than any slap. That night, I didn't just leave my daughter's house. I left behind the role I had played for 30 years, the endless giver, the living ATM, the woman who mistook sacrifice for love. The next morning, as I sat alone in the rented room, my eyes fell on a folded envelope in my purse. A paycheck stub. The paper had grown soft from being handled too many times. For 30 years, that envelope had been both a promise and a wound. Every payday, I would hold it in my hands and feel myself split in two. One half wanted to keep a little for myself. Maybe a new dress, maybe a ticket to the seaside. The other half, the heavier half, always won. Rent, tuition, groceries, shoes for Emily's growing feet. I used to earn $2,300 a month working night shifts as a nurse. Out of that, $1,800 went straight to Emily. Tuition bills, school trips, violin lessons, whatever she needed, I paid. That left me $500 to survive. $200 for rent in a cramped apartment, $150 for utilities, $100 for bus fare, and maybe $50 for food if nothing unexpected happened. There were nights I came home from 12-hour shifts, my feet swollen inside cheap sneakers, and found Emily's school form waiting on the table. Field trip, $65 due Monday. I would sigh, open the paycheck envelope, and slide the cash in without hesitation. My dinner that night? A single boiled egg. For 20 years, I never bought a new dress. 3 times, friends invited me to travel, to Las Vegas, to Florida beaches, even to a simple road trip. 3 times, I said no. Maybe next year, I would lie, but next year never came. Emily never knew the weight of those choices. Or perhaps she did, and simply decided it wasn't her concern. I remember when she was 17, standing in the kitchen, her eyes shining with excitement as she waved a glossy university brochure. "Mom, imagine me studying abroad in London," she said. My heart swelled, but I also knew the price. That same week, I walked into a bank and signed a loan paper for $45,000. My hand trembled as I scribbled my name, yet I told myself, this is love. This is what mothers do. Every month, the paycheck envelope felt thinner because the bank claimed its share. I would sit at my worn-out brown sofa, stack the bills on the coffee table, and whisper, "Hold on, Margaret. One day Emily will understand." But did she? Even back then, there were cracks I refused to see. Emily would smile sweetly. "Mom, you're my angel." Yet while her lips formed gratitude, her eyes flickered to the envelope in my hand, calculating. I told myself it was teenage ambition. I wanted to believe her love was pure. There was the winter I caught pneumonia after too many double shifts. Emily, then 20, came home from college for the holidays. She wrinkled her nose when she hugged me. "Mom, you smell like disinfectant." I laughed it off, saying, "That's the perfume of hospitals." She didn't laugh. She pulled back and asked instead, "Did the loan payment clear?" That moment should have warned me. But I smothered the ache. She's just stressed, I thought. She'll grow out of it. I see now that each paycheck envelope wasn't just paper. It was a silent contract I kept renewing between love and blindness. Sometimes I wonder, was I too naive? Did I mistake sacrifice for affection? I kept believing that the more I gave, the deeper her gratitude would grow. Instead, the more I gave, the deeper her expectations dug into me. There is one memory that never leaves me. Emily was 9. She had broken her favorite doll. She cried until I promised to buy her a new one. Payday came. I took the envelope, walked into the store, and bought a doll that cost half a week's groceries. When I placed it in her hands, her tears dried instantly. She hugged me and whispered, "You're the best, Mom." That sentence, "You're the best, Mom," became my drug. I chased it for decades, feeding it with dollars, hours, and pieces of my own life. Now, at 62, I finally admit what I could not say then. I thought I was her angel. But I was nothing more than a cash machine with a heartbeat. It didn't happen in some dramatic courtroom. It happened in my own kitchen, over a chipped coffee mug. Emily had come by that morning. She didn't even sit down. She stood by the counter, scrolling her phone, and when I asked if she could help me carry groceries, she looked up and snapped, "You're just a useless old woman." The words landed harder than any slap. My knees weakened. The coffee mug slipped in my hand, clinking against the sink. I froze, watching the steam curl upward, my reflection trembling in the liquid surface. I had been called many things in life: nurse, caregiver, neighbor, friend. But never useless. That word pierced through 30 years of sacrifice like a knife through old fabric. I stood there long after she left, the silence louder than her insult. And inside me, something cracked. My thoughts came like hammer blows. If I keep going like this, what will I lose next? 2. If I keep going, I will lose my tiny apartment. If I keep going, I will lose my dignity. If I keep going, I will lose myself. Yes. I stared at my laptop on the table. The screen glowed faintly, as if daring me. For months, I had kept the automatic transfer set up. 1,200 each month wired to Emily's account. My hands shook as I moved the mouse. The cursor hovered over the "Cancel Transfer" button. My breathing grew shallow. My chest pounded as if I were about to commit a crime. My finger trembled, hovering above the trackpad. What if she hates me forever? What if I end up alone? But what if I don't stop now? In that moment, I weighed the stakes like a nurse checking a patient's pulse. If I canceled, I risked Emily's anger, her rejection, maybe even complete estrangement. If I didn't, I risked the last piece of my independence, the last fragment of self-respect I had left. The choice was cruel, but it was also clear. I exhaled slowly, my finger pressing down. Click. The red button blinked. The transfer disappeared. Tears blurred my vision. hot and unstoppable. But they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of release. For the first time in decades, I had done something, not for Emily, not for the bank, not for anyone else, but for me. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. My shoulders straightened. My voice, even though no one was there to hear it, came out firm. I am not useless. I am not an ATM. I am Margaret Wilson, and I choose me. The air in the room shifted. The clock ticked the same way it always had, but it no longer felt like a countdown to my extinction. It felt like the beginning of a new hour, a different life. The moment I pressed cancel, I heard the chains break inside my chest. The knock on the door was too loud, too fast, like a fist demanding entry, not a family visit. When I opened it, Emily stormed in first, her heels clacking against the hardwood. Her husband, Mark, followed, carrying a thick folder of papers. They didn't ask to sit. They took the living room like they owned it. The space that once smelled of coffee and lavender felt poisoned. On the table, I had left a teacup. My hand trembled when I reached for it, the porcelain rattling against the saucer. Emily threw a stack of papers onto the table. They slid across the surface, stopping just short of my lap. "Sign this, Mom. It's just a power of attorney. It'll make everything easier." I looked at the black ink, the neat lines waiting for my signature. My throat tightened. I whispered, "Easier for whom?" Mark stepped forward, adjusting his tie. "For you, of course. You don't need the stress of finances at your age. We'll take care of everything." I studied their faces. Emily's smile was too sharp, Mark's eyes too calculating. "You owe me, Mom," Emily snapped suddenly, breaking the pretense. Her arms folded tight. "Without me, you'd be nothing." The words burned. My chest clenched. I pressed the saucer down, steadying my shaking hand. I raised my head, my voice steadier than I felt. "No, Emily. Without me, you wouldn't even have your degree." Her lips parted, stunned for a second, then curled into a sneer. Mark slammed his palm on the table. The teacup jumped, spilling a dark stain across the wood. "Stop being dramatic. Sign it. You're being stubborn." The sound echoed through the small room, as if a gavel had struck. I forced myself to breathe, to meet their eyes. "I am not your emotional ATM anymore." Emily's face twisted. "You're selfish, after everything I've done for you." I cut her off. "What you've done for me, Emily, I carried debts, sleepless nights, and sickness for you. Don't twist this." Her heel clicked against the floor as she stepped closer, pointing a finger in my face. "If you don't sign, we'll make sure the law gets involved." "Do you really want to end up in court, humiliated?" The folder slid closer to me, its pages fanning out like blades. I stared at it. My pulse roared in my ears. This wasn't just paper. It was a noose. My knees shook, but I stood. The chair scraped backward, its legs screeching against the floor. I straightened my spine, raised my chin, and declared, "This isn't a family conversation anymore. This is a trial inside my own living room." Emily blinked, startled by my sudden steadiness. Mark muttered under his breath, cursing. The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time, I felt the balance shift, not in their favor, but mine. Emily grabbed the folder, slamming it shut. "Fine. We'll see what the court says." Her voice shook, but not with fear, with fury. She yanked Mark toward the door, their footsteps echoing. When the door slammed behind them, the walls quivered. I stood in the wreckage. The overturned chair, the spilled tea, the smell of fear still thick in the air. My hands were trembling, but inside me, a fire had been lit. For the first time in years, I hadn't yielded. This was no longer a mother-daughter quarrel. This was a courtroom carved inside my living room. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, the kind of gray morning that makes city sidewalks look like old bruises. It was thick, official, stamped with a red bar that read URGEZENT. Service of process. My name. Margaret Louise Wilson looked foreign in that font, as if the paper had borrowed me and bent me out of shape. My hands shook when I slid it open with a butter knife. The knife slipped and nicked my thumb. A bright bead of blood bloomed on the pad, neat and accusing. I pressed it to a napkin and unfolded the papers with the other hand. Complaint for financial exploitation, elder instability, and mismanagement. Plaintiff, Emily Carter. Defendant, Margaret Wilson. My daughter's name. My own blood stacked against mine like a wall. The room tilted. The refrigerator hummed too loudly. The clock on the stove flipped from 7:59 to 8:30, with a soft click that sounded, to my raw nerves, like a lock turning. I sat. The chair's leg wobbled. My thumb throbbed. I read the lines again, slower, as if slowing down could change the words. They claimed I was mentally compromised, that I had erratic spending patterns that endangered family stability, that I had promised support to plaintiff contingent on her education and long-term caretaking, a promise I had abandoned without cause. There were exhibits. There were affidavits. There were screenshots of bank transfers sliced out of context, circled with red annotations like, I was a crime scene diagram. I pressed my palm to my chest and whispered to no one, how dare you? By noon, the whispers had started on our street. At the corner store, Mrs. Patel leaned too far over the counter to give me change and asked, with a kindness that felt like a pat on the head, are you all right, dear? I heard something about courts. At the bakery, the clerk wrapped my loaf in 2 sheets of paper instead of 1, as if I might break on the walk home. The summons felt less like paper and more like a brand. I could sense it glowing through my purse. I walked faster. But you can't outrun your own name. That evening, I laid everything on the kitchen table like I used to lay out Emily's school supplies. Neat stacks, sharpened edges, the complaint, the exhibits, the form letter that told me where to appear. April 25, 10,000 a.m. Courtroom 3B. I watched the numbers sit there, patient and certain. I had a month to become someone who could survive 3 letters. V. I called the only person whose voice could land an airplane. Daniel Harper, 45, the courtroom calm I'd once seen on a local news clip. He was known, quietly, stubbornly, for defending older women whose families mistook them for livestock. He picked up on the 3rd ring. Harper. I swallowed. Mr. Harper, my name is Margaret Wilson. My daughter has filed. My voice cracked. She's filed a complaint. Silence from his end, but not empty. More like the stillness of someone leaning forward. Tell me where you are, he said. I'll come to you. He arrived within the hour. No parade. No briefcase theatrics. Navy suit. Scuffed shoes. Kind eyes. He looked around my small apartment like a doctor scanning a chart, registering the spilled sugar near the stove, the damp dish towel, the stack of bills clipped with a clothespin. We sat at the table. He read. He did not interrupt. When he finished, he laced his fingers and said, First, you breathe. Second, we gather. He tapped the exhibits with his knuckle. These are selective screenshots. We will need context. Bank statements going back at least 3 years. Proof of your regular support. Anything that shows pattern and intent. I nodded. My paycheck motif, those envelopes I'd saved without knowing why, suddenly looked less like nostalgia and more like evidence. I brought out an old shoebox from the closet. Inside, pay stubs from as far back as 2003, loan payment receipts, a ledger I kept in pencil with notes like NA 14, tuition deposit, 2,400, deck 2, winter coat Emily, $89. 99, deck 19, electricity 85 rain made the envelope soggy. Small, exact, anchored to days. Daniel smiled without softness. Good. We make truth heavy. He drew a clean legal pad from his bag. Tell me the names of anyone who has seen your support over time. Linda Chen, I said. My neighbor. 70. She saw me hand Emily cash when the bank transfer failed in June 2022. And Carlos Alvarez, the pharmacist, he knows I paid for Emily's asthma meds in March 2019. And? I hesitated. The word felt like a bruise. Mark. He picked up envelopes for Emily a few times when she couldn't come. Daniel's pen paused. Mark won't help us. No, I said. But he signed for a package on Oct 5, 2021, a loan consolidation letter. His name's on the receipt from the courier. Perfect, he said. He doesn't have to help to become a witness to what is. The next days fell into a rhythm I didn't know I had in me. Mornings at the bank, afternoons combing through boxes, evenings at the scanner in the library, page after page, feeding into the light like offerings. I labeled each PDF with dates, not drama, 2003, 05 E01, pay stub, 2014, 09, 12 school invoice, 2020, 12 218, transfer receipt. Between the tasks, the world pressed in. I heard that Emily had visited Pastor Green at the church I no longer attended because I worked Sundays for years. She cried, I was told, and said I was slipping. Mom forgets things, she allegedly told him. I'm just trying to help. The pastor called, voice careful, pastorally neutral. Margaret, are you feeling all right? You know we're here for you. I thanked him and hung up gently. I sat with my phone in my lap for a long time after, feeling like a door everyone had decided they could knock on. At the farmer's market, two women I'd known since Emily was little leaned in over peaches and asked, Is it true? EOS. Not T. How are you? Just that. Truth had become gossip's mirror. Whichever way they faced it, it threw the same light back. Daniel warned me the other side would try to shape a story through repetition. They will repeat a lie until it sounds like furniture, he said. We will anchor with dates, with voices not in your bloodline. He arranged a meeting with Linda Chen. She arrived with a tin of almond cookies and the kind of hug that buckles your knees. She spoke softly but with steel. I saw Margaret hand Emily $400 in June 2022 after a bank glitch. I also saw Margaret fix the leaky faucet in Emily's apartment in January 2021 while Emily watched TV. We wrote it down. We filed it. We breathed. Then came the affidavits from Emily's side. Daniel emailed them late Wednesday with a simple subject line, received. I opened the PDF and felt the heat rise in my face. A woman I barely knew. Tiffany, a friend of Emily's who'd visited twice, had sworn that I had violent temper swings and threw things. The dates she offered were convenient nights. I was on double shift at the hospital. Daniel highlighted my time cards to show I wasn't even home. Mark's affidavit claimed I had offered the automatic transfers in exchange for Emily handling future placements. If I became ill phrasing slick enough to sound like a contract. The next exhibit was a photo of a document, a power of attorney, with my name crammed at the bottom in a shaky scrawl that looked like my hands on a cold day. The ink bled at the curves. My stomach turned. I'd never seen that copy. The signature date read August 14, 2023, a Monday I spent at St. Mary's, according to my shift roster, 7,000 p.m., 7,000 a.m., medication rounds, supervisor, K. Martinez. That's not your signature, Daniel said flatly, and even if they try to make it yours, your whereabouts and tasks are logged down to the 15-minute mark. Hospitals are good for one thing, receipts. We set about gathering camera footage from the ATM, where I made occasional deposits. The bank's manager, a woman with a jaw like a captain's, pulled June 3, 2226, 14 p.m. at my request. In the clip, you can see me feed cash into the machine, then step aside for Mark, who reaches into his coat for a blue envelope and waves at the camera as a joke. He forgot that cameras don't share jokes. They archive them. Every night, when the tasks were done and the documents were labeled, the apartment got quiet in a new way. Not empty poised. The silence wasn't accusing anymore. It was the stillness of a stage before the curtain rises. And yet, fear threaded everything. Fear that judges don't always see what mothers see. Fear that Emily's tears, those practiced pearls, would pull the room toward her like gravity. Fear that the lie would become furniture. A text pinged from an unknown number one afternoon. You should be ashamed. A mother owes her child. No signature. Cowardice rarely signs. I deleted it. 5 minutes later, another. People talk. You'll lose. I turned my phone face down and went back to labeling. 2009. C03222. Pharmacy receipt. Albuterol. Between the blows, life made room for breath. Carlos from the pharmacy came by after his shift with a brown bag of groceries he pretended he'd overbought. He said, "I remember you paid for Emily's inhaler when the insurer denied the claim. $302. I wrote it in our mismatch log because I felt bad." He offered a photocopy. We scanned it. Linda brewed jasmine tea and told me about her late husband's stubbornness and the first time she changed a light bulb by herself. We laughed. A small sound that felt like stitching. Daniel never promised victory. He promised preparation. He taught me how to stand in courtroom 3B without shaking. Answer only what's asked, he said. Don't decorate. Dates. Amounts. Actions. You are strongest where you are most specific. So I practiced. I stood in front of my mirror and said, "My name is Margaret Wilson. I worked night shifts as a nurse. I earned $2,300 a month. For 30 years, I gave $1,800 to my daughter's needs. I paid for London tuition by taking a $45,000 bank loan on May 4, 2010. I canceled an automatic transfer of $1,200 on March 2, 2025, at 9:12 a.m. The numbers stopped being wounds. They became nails. I hammered them into a scaffold that could hold me up. Still, on certain nights, especially when the wind hit the windows just right, I would sit on the old brown sofa, my other motif, the survivor of 3 apartments, and hear my mother's voice, not Emily's, my own mother saying, "Family is the boat, Margaret." And I would whisper back, "What if the boat drills holes in itself?" Daniel called one morning with a voice that meant bad news. "They found someone to claim they saw you sign the power of attorney last August. A neighbor from Emily's building." "Who?" "A superintendent named Greg Holt. His affidavit says he witnessed you in the lobby on August 14 at 7:30 p.m. with pen in hand." I looked at my St. Mary's shift log, pinned now to my refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a strawberry. 7,000 p.m. 7,000 a.m. I was on a med round at 7:30, I said. I was co-signing narcotics with Nurse Martinez. There's an electronic stamp. He exhaled. Then we don't get angry. We get the log. We got the log. We got Martinez to sign a statement. Time, date, patient initials, medication count. We pulled the security entry that showed my ID badge was scanned into the medroom at 7:29 p.m. We printed these like prayers. Not all allies wore suits or kept ledgers. One afternoon, a girl in a denim jacket knocked, awkward and earnest. Sophie, a former classmate of Emily's. "I heard what she's doing," she said, cheeks flushed. "Emily always joked that mom is my stipend." I thought it was gross. I can write that. I can swear it. I thanked her and cried after she left. Not because her statement would save me, but because the world, even tilted, still offered straight lines. The push-pull of the weeks made a strange music. Another rumor, another affidavit, Emily's lawyer emailing concerns about my memory lapses. Gian Linda's tea, Carlos's groceries, Daniel's quiet, good work, when I laid another labeled folder on the table. On April 3rd, I walked past Emily on the sidewalk. She was with Mark. She stared straight ahead, as if my face were a blank storefront. I lifted my chin. She lowered hers. We passed like strangers. It hurt in a clean, surgical way. Pain, but tidy. I understood, finally, that I was not losing a daughter. I was acknowledging that the daughter I thought I had did not exist in the shape I gave her. At night, I kept a summons on the table not to punish myself, but to desensitize my fear. I drank tea beside it. I paid the gas bill beside it. The paper grew less venomous in proximity, still a snake, but one I could name. On April 12, Daniel sent a message. They filed a new exhibit bank statement showing H5000's protectors withdrawal. You made ins August 2023, followed by H5000's protectors deposit to your account 2 days later. They're calling it money shuffling. I remembered the exact 5,000. I had withdrawn it to pay a contractor for fixing a roof leak at Emily's apartment when her ceilings bubbled after a storm. The contractor never arrived. Emily texted to, "Hold it," said Mark found someone cheaper. 2 days later, I redeposited the cash. I still had the text thread. The message bubble with Emily's words. "Hold the cash. Mark's got a guy." Timestamp, Aug 19, 2023, 5:42 p.m. We printed it. We added the weather report from that week, annotated with Emily's zip code. Localized storm, roof damage complaints. We printed 3 photos I had taken of the ceiling blister, with the day's date imprint at the corner. The small digital numbers I'd always found ugly became beautiful. 08-17-23. If this was war, truth was our ammunition. We weren't running out. And yet, alone in the dark, I held my breath against a creeping dread. Not that I would lose the case, but that I would lose the narrative of my own life. That the version with the louder microphone would drown me out. That a lie repeated enough times would take the shape of my shadow. One night, I dreamed of the paycheck envelope. The old paper I'd held for decades. In the dream, it grew hands and tried to crawl back into Emily's purse. I woke up with my heart racing and the taste of copper. I went to the kitchen, opened a real envelope, and wrote a sentence on the back with a black pen, pressing hard enough to engrave the wood beneath. I am not the crime they are describing. I taped that envelope to the refrigerator beside the bedroom log. The next day, Linda knocked with a bag of warm bao. "You must eat," she scolded gently, arranging them on a plate. Warriors don't march on fumes. We sat and split one open. Steam ghosted the air. For a moment, I let the normalcy melt the edges of the summons. Before she left, Linda squeezed my shoulder. "You know," she said, "sometimes it takes losing the wrong version of a child to meet the right version of yourself." When the door closed, I stood in the soft quiet of my kitchen and let that sentence settle where fear had been nesting. By April 18th, our folders had grown into a modest fortress. Bank statements with consistent support. GS loan records with my signature and dates. Chime cards and bedroom logs with minute level entries. Text screenshots with time-stamped instructions. Tay. Witness letters from Linda, Carlos, and Sophie. ATM footage with Mark's forgetful wave. Daniel flipped through the stack, then looked at me as if checking my temperature. "We're ready for courtroom 3B, he said. "It won't be about who cries prettiest. It will be about who remembers precisely." I nodded, but felt the old tremor in my fingertips. I flattened them against the table, left hand over right, the way nurses steady a vial before they draw blood. Night fell early that evening, as if the sky wanted to shorten the road to what came next. I washed my cup, folded my towel, and laid out my clothes for the hearing. A simple navy dress, clean limes. I placed my ID, my reading glasses, and a peppermint in my purse. I slid one last item inside, the envelope from the refrigerator with my sentence on it. I turned off the kitchen light. The apartment went quiet. The good kind. I stood in the doorway to the living room and looked back at the table where my life had been cataloged into dates and numbers and names. It didn't look like a battlefield anymore. It looked like an altar. And then the thought came, clear as glass, sharp as winter. When my daughter became the plaintiff, I finally understood. Blood doesn't exempt anyone from greed. Iskai K. I went to bed, but sleep sat on the other side of the room, watching. I stared at the ceiling and asked the question I had been circling for weeks, the one that hung in the air like a suspended note. If they forged one document already, what else have they made in my name? And will I find it in time? It was past midnight when I went down to take out the trash. The hallway smelled faintly of bleach and overripe fruit. I lifted the lid of the bin, meaning to toss away scraps, when a corner of paper caught my eye. Too crisp, too official to belong there. Something in me froze. I reached in, fingers brushing against the cool surface of a half-burned document. The edges were charred black, but the middle was intact. My heart lurched as I pulled it free. The paper was stiff under my trembling hands. The ink had blurred in spots from heat, but one thing stood out clearly: my signature. Except it wasn't mine. The scrawl was shaky, exaggerated, like someone had studied my hand on a bad day and copied it with trembling theatrics. The date read August 14th, 2023. My eyes widened. That was the very night I had been logged into the medication room at St. Sainter, Mary's, 7,000 p.m. to 7:00 a.m. My initials, my badge scans, Nurse Martinez co-signing every entry. I had proof I wasn't anywhere near this page. My pulse thudded in my ears. The silence of the hallway pressed in heavy, broken only by the tick of the radiator. I whispered, as if the paper could hear me. This is it. This is the noose they built. This is how they mean to hang me. I staggered back into my apartment, locking the door with 2 twists. I laid the paper flat on the kitchen table. The lamp above flickered, turning the ink into a dark bruise. Questions pounded through me. How many lies are stitched around my name? CHA. How long has this been planned? TSC. Was every smile a rehearsal for this moment? TSS. If they could fake my signature once, what else could they fake? I pressed my fingertips hard into the forged lines. My hand shook, but a strange clarity rose inside me. My breath steadied, not from calm, but from resolve. I picked up the phone. Daniel Harper answered on the second ring. Harper. I didn't waste words. I found it, I said, voice low but sharp. The forged power of attorney. Half-burned. It's in my hand right now. A pause. Then his tone shifted quick, precise, like a scalpel. Keep it safe. Don't touch it more than you already have. Put it in a plastic sleeve if you can. I'll arrange for it to be collected and logged. This changes everything. I looked down at the paper, blackened edges curling like a guilty smile. I'm ready to fight, I whispered. For the first time in months, the words didn't feel like hope. They felt like a declaration. My hands were trembling, but the paper trembled more, because it knew the truth was about to rip it open. The kitchen table turned into a war desk. Where once I'd folded laundry and sorted grocery coupons, now there were bank statements, transfer receipts, and ATM camera stills lined up like soldiers in formation. Daniel Harper sat across from me, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. His pen tapped steadily against a yellow pad, as if keeping rhythm with my heartbeat. He pointed to the neat stacks I'd been building for weeks. This isn't just paper, Margaret. This is armor. Every date, every dollar, it speaks louder than tears. I slid another envelope toward him. 30 years of pay stubs. I don't know why I kept them. He gave me a rare half-smile. Because you knew one day you might need to prove your truth. The work was relentless. Each page had to be cross-checked, labeled, logged. Sometimes the numbers blurred, my eyes aching. But Daniel's voice anchored me. Details win. Keep steady. At night, after he left, I faced another battlefield. My reflection. The mirror in my bedroom became my judge's bench. I stood before it, paper in hand, and began to practice. My name is Margaret Wilson. I am 62 years old. I worked as a night shift nurse for 30 years. I earned $2,300 a month. I gave $1,800 of it to my daughter, Emily, for her education and living expenses. The first night, my voice broke on the word daughter. My chest caved. Tears ran before I reached the second sentence. I clutched the dresser for balance, hating the wobble in my tone. The second night, I tried again. My lips trembled, but I made it through 3 sentences before collapsing onto the bed. The third night, I straightened my spine, met my own eyes, and forced my tone low and clear. I stumbled, but less. By the end of the week, the stammer turned to steadiness. The tremor in my throat quieted. One evening, Linda Chen knocked on my door. 70 years old, hair silver but eyes sharp. She carried a small basket of steamed buns, fragrant with ginger. She listened as I rehearsed, arms folded, nodding slightly. When I faltered, she stepped closer, took my hands in hers, and said, "Margaret, your voice is your weapon. Use it." Her words sank deep, more potent than any legal strategy. Later that night, I pressed both palms against the mirror, leaned in until my breath fogged the glass, and whispered, "Silence nearly killed me once. This time, silence will not win." The preparation became ritual. By day, I filed documents into labeled binders: transfers 2010-2025, loan receipts, medical shift logs. By night, I rehearsed lines as if they were oxygen drills, inhaling strength, exhaling fear. The files grew heavier, but so did my resolve. Each receipt was a chisel, carving me out of the stone of victimhood. Each date was a step from shadow into light. When Daniel came again, I showed him my mirror routine. My voice held firm, my hands steady. He nodded once, not indulgently but with recognition. "You're ready." I looked at the stack of folders, the boxes of envelopes, the highlighted logs, and realized something I had never dared to say. I am not defenseless. I am not alone. I practiced speaking as if practicing to breathe, because silence had almost killed me once. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and paper, a sterile mix that clung to my skin. I stepped into courtroom 3B. The air sharp with fluorescent light. Rows of wooden benches creaked as people shifted, their whispers rippling like a restless tide. At the front, the judge's bench rose high, draped in solemn black. The bailiff's gavel struck once, a crack that silenced every breath. I sat at the defendant's table, palms pressed flat, nails biting into my skin to stop the trembling. Beside me, Daniel Harper adjusted his tie, calm as stone. Across the aisle, Emily sat in pale pink, hair immaculate, a handkerchief folded neatly in her palm. Mark leaned close to her, whispering something that made her lips twitch into a smile. When the clerk called the case, Carter versus Wilson, my name hung in the air like a charge. Emily rose first. Her voice cracked, perfectly rehearsed. "My mother is unstable," she said, tears glistening under the harsh white light. "She forgets things. She sends money erratically. I've only tried to protect her from her own decline." She dabbed her eyes with the handkerchief. A murmur ran through the spectators. I clenched my fists, nails carving crescents into my palms. Mark followed, laying down the forged power of attorney. "This is her signature," he said firmly. "She gave us permission. We only acted out of duty." The judge raised an eyebrow but said nothing. My chest burned. Daniel stood. His voice cut the air clean. "Your Honor, this is selective storytelling. My client, Margaret Wilson, supported her daughter consistently for nearly 3 decades. I submit 28 years of bank transfers, Documented, dated, logged. He placed a thick binder on the judge's desk. Pages of numbers, neat columns, highlighted dates. Truth, weighty and undeniable. He lifted the supposed power of attorney with 2 fingers. And this is forgery. On the date of this signature, my client was logged into St. Mary's Hospital, working a 12-hour shift. We have her badge scans, medication logs, and her supervisor's statement. Ladies and gentlemen, this signature is a fiction. Emily shifted in her seat. The handkerchief twisted tighter in her fingers. First came Carlos Alvarez, the pharmacist. Mrs. Wilson paid for her daughter's inhaler, $312, when insurance refused coverage. March 2019. I logged it myself. Then Linda Chen, neighbor and friend, voice steady. I saw Margaret hand Emily $400 in June 2022. She was embarrassed the bank transfer had failed. I was there. I remember. Finally, a quiet young woman in denim, Sophie, Emily's old classmate. She glanced at Emily, then at me. Emily used to joke, "My mom is my stipend. I always thought it was cruel. I can't stay silent now." Each statement stacked like bricks, building a wall against the lies. At one point, I saw my own son, David, sitting behind Emily, his gaze fixed on the floor. He had chosen silence, his presence a blade in my ribs. I swallowed hard, the ache sharper than any accusation. The judge gestured. "Mrs. Wilson, you may speak." I rose. My knees trembled, but my back was straight. I looked at Emily, my child, my blood, and then at the bench. "My name is Margaret Wilson," I began. My voice echoed, steadier than I expected. "I am 62 years old. I carried debts, scars, and sleepless nights to raise the daughter sitting there." I inhaled, slow, deep. Yes, I am older now. Yes, I forget small things. But I have not forgotten the 30 years of work that kept a roof over her head. I have not forgotten the nights I skipped meals so she could eat. I have not forgotten signing a bank loan for $45,000 so she could study in London. My voice rose. I will not carry the shame of being robbed of my dignity. I am not unstable. I am not useless. I am not an ATM with a pulse. I am a woman who has given, and I will not be stolen from. Silence followed, thick, unblinking. Even the judge leaned slightly forward. The gavel struck once, loud as thunder. The court finds that the plaintiff's claims are unfounded. The alleged power of attorney is rejected as fraudulent. The defendant, Margaret Wilson, retains full authority over her assets and estate. Case dismissed. The words struck deeper than any insult ever had. My shoulders sagged. My breath broke into a sob. But it was not despair. It was release. As the courtroom emptied, light streamed through the high windows, catching dust in golden beams. I felt it on my skin, warm for the first time in months. Daniel touched my shoulder. "You stood taller than the lies." I nodded, unable to speak, tears wetting my cheeks but tasting of salt and freedom, not grief. The day the judge's gavel fell, I heard my heart reclaim its name. The apartment was too quiet when I came home. After the noise of the courtroom, the gavel, the murmurs, the snapping of folders, the silence felt cavernous, like walking into an empty cathedral. I placed my purse on the table, the same table where, weeks ago, I had spread out evidence like armor. Now it looked bare. The sunlight through the window hit the wood in a way that revealed scratches, stains, a faint ring from a long-forgotten teacup. Imperfections I'd never noticed, or never allowed myself to. I should have felt triumphant. I had won. The judge had dismissed every false claim. My dignity had been named and recognized, not just by me, but by the law itself. Yet as I stood in that room, the weight in my chest didn't lift. It shifted. It was no longer fear of losing everything. It was the echo of what I had already lost. I poured myself a cup of tea. The steam rose and vanished too quickly, leaving me staring at nothing. My hand clutched the handle. But I didn't drink. Across the table, the chair where Emily once sat looked painfully empty. My eyes stung. The verdict couldn't summon her back as my daughter. I have freedom, I told myself, but do I still have family? The question circled, sharp and relentless. I leaned back, pressing a hand against my ribs as if to quiet the ache inside. I remembered the courtroom, her face twisted in anger, the way she clung to Mark's arm as though I were a stranger, an enemy. I thought of the affidavit, the lies, the forged signature, all written with the same hand that once clung to mine crossing a busy street. A sob tore loose before I could stop it. It wasn't the sob of a victim anymore. It was the sob of someone mourning the truth. My daughter was gone, even if her body still walked this world. The clock ticked. I wiped my face and forced myself to breathe. I stood, moved slowly through the apartment, touching small objects as though anchoring myself. The chipped mug, the brown sofa, the old lamp with its yellow shade. Survivors, like me. When night fell, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed the judge's words, Daniel's steady voice, Linda's supportive smile. But in between those memories slipped images of Emily. Her toddler curls, her teenage laughter, the day she first boarded the plane to London, turning back to wave. Victory had carved me free, yes, but freedom has edges, and mine cut deep in the dark. Near midnight, I rose, wrapped myself in a shawl, and opened the window. Cool air rushed in, smelling faintly of rain. I let it fill my lungs, standing there until my shoulders loosened. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, a car door slammed, life went on. I sipped what was left of my tea, now lukewarm. It didn't taste like triumph. It tasted like survival. And maybe that was enough for tonight. Winning in court could not fill the empty chair at my table. The first morning in my new apartment, I walked barefoot across the cool wooden floor and opened the balcony doors. The ocean air rushed in salt and wind and promise. I carried a small white cup of coffee to the railing. It felt weightless in my hand, so different from the heavy phone I once clung to, waiting for Emily's demands. I took a sip and let the warmth spread. The sound of waves replaced the old ticking of the clock that used to suffocate me. For the first time in years, my breath matched the rhythm of something larger than fear. I had sold the house, shed the walls that remembered too many arguments, too many slammed doors. What I bought instead was space, an apartment by the sea, not grand, not polished, but mine. Every corner answered only to me. The brown sofa that once witnessed my despair? I gave it away to a young couple moving in nearby. They carried it out laughing, unaware of the ghosts stitched in its fabric. I watched them go, and felt only relief. In its place now stood a simple wooden chair on the balcony, where I sat with the sunrise. Life reshaped itself slowly. I joined a painting class at the community center. My hands, so used to gripping medical charts and bills, now learned to hold brushes. The first canvas was clumsy, colors bleeding, but when Linda came to visit and saw it, she said, "It looks like freedom learning how to walk." I laughed, really laughed, in a way I hadn't in years. Travel followed. A bus trip to the mountains, a train ride to a neighboring city, even a plane ticket to Paris with a small group of retirees. I stood under the Eiffel Tower with strangers who soon became friends, and for once, I didn't think of what Emily might say or demand. I thought only of the wind in my hair, the light on the steel, the simple fact that I was there. I practiced saying a word that used to choke me. No. No, I can't lend money. No, I don't owe you this. No, I will not silence myself to keep the peace. And with every no, my spine grew straighter, my steps lighter. At night, I sometimes took out the old envelopes of pay stubs. They no longer felt like chains. They felt like proof that I had endured, that I had given everything, and survived. I placed one inside my sketchbook, not as evidence for court, but as a reminder. I am allowed to keep something for myself. I no longer wait for calls that never come. My phone is lighter now, too, carrying only the voices I choose. Linda, Carlos, new friends from art class. I realized family is not always bound by blood. Sometimes it is bound by kindness, by the quiet act of showing up with warm bread or a listening ear. One evening, as the sun sank into the horizon, I whispered to the sea, I am not an emotional ATM. I am the keeper of my own freedom. And the waves answered, steady and sure, carrying the words back to me. Freedom was never something handed to me. It was what I wrested back from the very hands that tried to claim it. I raised my cup once more. The coffee was nearly gone, but its lightness remained. The horizon stretched wide, endless, and for the first time, so did I. Thank you. Truly, thank you for staying with me until the end of this journey. I am Margaret Wilson, a mother who was once treated as nothing more than a walking wallet, but who now holds the key to her own life. Every sentence I've shared with you has carried both scars and light, and the fact that you've read this far means you've walked beside me through both. So let me ask you one question. Not as a stranger, but as someone who has stood where love turns into chains. If one day, the person you love most turns you into a tool, would you keep paying the price, or would you stand up to protect your dignity? I don't ask lightly. I know how hard that question is. I know the weight of silence, the temptation to believe that sacrifice will buy affection. I know how lonely it feels to even consider saying no to blood. But I also know that survival begins the moment you choose your own worth. If my story stirred something in you, anger, grief, recognition, please don't keep it to yourself. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you would choose, what you have chosen, or what you wish you had chosen. Your words might be the rope someone else is reaching for in the dark. If you believe this story carries a truth worth spreading, share it with someone who may need the courage to draw their own boundaries. And if you want to walk further with me, follow along. I share one real journey each week. Stories of loss, yes, but also stories of standing back up, of reclaiming freedom, of remembering that love without respect is not love at all. I will leave you with this. I am no longer an emotional ATM. I am the keeper of the key to my own freedom. I am not an ATM with feelings. I am the one who holds the key to the freedom that bears my name. Dame.